Hi, friends. You are listening to the Happiness Soundtrack. My name is Jana Barrett, but you can call me Jana Banana. I'm a commercial flight attendant, and I am fascinated by the associations we form with music. For me, one of those associations got too strong, so for my birthday in 2024, I decided to spend a full year listening only to music I'd never heard before. To find new songs, I started passing around a journal, asking people to write about a song that reminds them of a happy memory. Those songs are what I call the Happiness Soundtrack. I try to ask at least one person a day, and I'll keep going until every page of that journal is full. This is where I share some of the songs, the stories, and the beautiful moments that unfold from that one simple question. If you'd like to get a link to these stories in your inbox every week, along with all the show notes, you can subscribe to emails at happinesssoundtrack.com. There is a link in the show notes. The website also has more details about the project, such as monthly playlists of every song in the journal, and a submission page where you can share your song. Today, I want to tell you part 2 of when I used the question as a pickup line. Now, the title of this episode is different because it's a different story from the way I met this person. It's about a lesson I learned through dating him, and it goes a lot deeper than whatever might be implied from a title like the previous episode. But if you have not listened to episode 9 yet, when I used the question as a pickup line, you should definitely do that first and then come back to this one, so it makes more sense. All right, are you ready? Here we go. Michael and I had planned to have our first date while he was in town for the holiday. However, since he was visiting family, time with them took precedence. In the end, he was unable to find time for himself before I had to leave for my next work trip. So we started having phone calls, generally for hours at a time. I admired his depth, adored his sense of humor, and enjoyed discovering more interesting similarities and intriguing differences between us. I told him how the impetus for the project had been my year-long music diet. At the time, I was almost 3 months in and was still having withdrawals. "So how's it work?" he asked. "If we're together and a song that you already know starts playing on the radio, do you have to cover your ears? Do I need to change the station?" "No, actually, that would be amazing. I can listen to familiar songs by happenstance, like over the radio or in a movie or on a commercial. I can also listen to live performances or covers. It's a way to make the music special again, you know? Nowadays, every song is available at any time, but they become precious when you put limitations around them." "Yeah, for sure. Well, that's cool. So what are some songs you miss the most?" he asked. "Oh man, I have a whole list." I laughed and shared some of my most beloved tracks and artists, including the Beatles. Now, most people do like the Beatles. A lot of people even love the Beatles. But me? I am a fanatic about them. And I was pleased to discover that Michael was also a big fan of their music. The conversation later evolved into what we were looking for in our romantic connections. And we were mutually excited by how well we aligned. It wasn't just a spark, chemistry, and attraction. It was also common values, wants, needs, backgrounds, and timing. We both felt strong romantic potential. Michael asked about my last relationship and why it hadn't worked out. "Well, he was a pilot who was based on the opposite side of the country," I started. "At first, the distance wasn't even an issue. We kept in touch so well between visits. Besides, when you're in aviation, you accept that any relationship will have a distance component due to the nature of the work. I think the fact that both of us knew that made us work harder for it." "Gotcha. That makes sense," he said. After a while, though, it got harder and harder to coordinate visits. He had a lot going on in his life, as well as kids to help raise. I could tell I was very low on the priority list. And eventually it just felt like there wasn't room for me. Towards the end, I felt very much overlooked and forgotten. It was hurtful. I couldn't do it anymore. Michael understood how important it was to me that we stay in touch and prioritize each other, and it showed in his actions. We spoke every day, whether it was texting or phone calls, or exchanging our daily scores in Wordle. He often sent pictures of his day to include me in his life. When I texted, he responded. When I called, he answered. Isn't it crazy that this is newsworthy? Welcome to modern dating. He consistently made time to connect with me and grow closer on a daily basis, even though we were several states apart. Once on a layover, he asked if I had time for a phone call. I told him I was laying down for bed and only had about 5 minutes. Regardless, he jumped at the opportunity. He called just to say hi and wish me a good night. I treasured how he consistently made time for me. It made me feel valued, appreciated, and cared for. After about a month, I was able to get a layover in Houston. Michael planned brunch and an art museum for our first date and picked me up at the hotel. When I stepped outside, I saw that handsome, scruffy face smiling at me from the curb, waiting to open his passenger door. We gave each other a hug, then climbed into the car and headed to breakfast. Michael reached over and held my hand. After a few moments of chatting, I heard John Lennon singing on the stereo. "It's the Beatles! Oh my God!" I excitedly interrupted our conversation to turn up the volume, and Michael chuckled. We both sang along to "Happiness is a Warm Gun" and spoke about our mutual adoration for the band. That song had just become a new happiness soundtrack for me. We held hands on our way into the cafe, too, and sat down for breakfast. We shared stories about music and travel, and got deeper about some former relationships. It didn't feel like a typical first date, because we'd already invested considerable time in each other. Less pressure, easier to find the conversation, and clearly connecting and mutually enjoying ourselves. Afterward, I asked if he had played the Wordle puzzle for the day. It was a cute little daily tradition to share our scores, but this time we could do it in person, as a team. I moved to his side of the table and sat next to him so we could play it together. It was exciting for both of us to be physically close for the first time, with someone we'd grown emotionally close to over the last month. As we drove to the art museum, another familiar song came over the speakers. This time, it was "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips. "Hey, it's your song!" I exclaimed. "That's right," he said through a smile as he squeezed my hand. We held hands a lot as we made our way through the exhibits. Occasionally, Michael would stand behind me and rub my shoulders and arms. Normally, I'm not so physically affectionate with someone on a first date, but I felt incredibly comfortable with him. Those interactions felt like the natural thing to do. It almost felt like we were already a couple. Afterwards, he drove us back to the hotel. We kicked off our shoes and laid across the bed, and I put on some background music as we chatted. "Okay, I'm about to tell you something weird," I said. "Awesome, let's hear it," he chuckled. I think he already understood that unusual thoughts and ideas would be a regular thing with me. Well, several years ago, I noticed how anytime I played an album that I listened to a lot in high school or middle school, it would transport me back to that time. Suddenly, I could remember a lot more details about that chapter of my life. So a long time ago, I started doing this intentionally, to build memories around music. Every time I feel like I'm in a new season or chapter, I find a new album, and I listen to it every day. As I started the music, I said, "This is my chapter album for right now." It's called "With You in Spirit" by Balance and Composure. They're one of my favorite bands. Thankfully, this album came out right after I went on my music diet. After a moment of reflection, I laughed. Oh my God, I'm so weird. I was slightly embarrassed at suddenly being face to face with my eccentricity. But Michael chuckled along with me and then responded, "Well, maybe, but I think it's cool." I smiled at feeling understood and appreciated. Then I leaned over and kissed him for the first time. We kept in touch between dates and continued to grow a little closer every day. I could tell it made us both happy. I came to Houston again about a week later. Even though art and music weren't part of the second date, it was even better than the first. We had scheduled our next date for a couple weeks later, but a few days prior, the plans fell through. Then the same thing happened for the date after that, and the one after that. Each for different reasons, and all beyond our control. The commitment to his kids as a single dad understandably took priority, but his workload and other parts of his life also started to demand more time than they had before. It was almost as though the universe was conspiring against us. Even though our connection had required effort, it had never felt like work. We had navigated our obstacles very well. Now they were bigger and more difficult. We had seemed to fit so easily into each other's lives at first, but I suddenly struggled to see where I could fit. I found myself frequently pondering one question. If I want this and he wants this, why can't we have it? Surely we could find a way to make this work, I thought. We saw each other a few more times over the following months. It wasn't nearly as much time as I'd wanted together, but it was something. Unfortunately, Michael's workload and schedule became busier and less predictable by the week. The phone calls came less frequently. Then the texts did too. Soon it seemed like there wasn't room for me in his life at all. I started to feel the way I had often felt at the end of my previous relationship. Unimportant. I saw that Michael had too much going on to develop or maintain a relationship, no matter how much he wanted to. He simply didn't have the capacity. But I struggled to admit that, and to accept it. I just wanted things to work. I knew the additional demands on his time wouldn't last forever. He was just in a busy season of life. Things were supposed to calm down again in a few months. Besides, I understood relationships aren't always easy. They require effort and patience. Navigating challenges together is part of that, if not all of that. But maybe it shouldn't feel so challenging before the relationship even starts. At some point, on a day that felt particularly lonely, I flipped to Michael's entry in the book and gazed at it mournfully. I thought back to that moment, the way we had met, the excitement we shared. That was the energy I'd always wanted my love story to have. It had started the way I'd always wanted it to start, you know? I reminisced about our first date and all the fun we'd had connecting through art and music. They're two subjects I'm deeply passionate about, and I haven't gotten to share those with many partners. I really appreciated getting to share them with Michael. I thought back to our time at the museum, and I remembered the cute little game he had devised for us after we'd gone through all the exhibits. Okay, we're gonna do something fun, he said. We have to figure out each other's favorite pieces in the whole museum. I love it, I exclaimed. We can't just say it, though. We have to lead each other to it. Okay, gotcha. Do you want to go first? I asked. He smiled and took my hand and led me straight to my favorite artwork. It was a hyper-realistic illustration by Tacita Dean, which appeared to be made with chalk or pastels. The canvas was enormous and circular, and black. No frame. The subject was a full moon, partially obscured by clouds. I found it captivating. It wasn't just because of the beauty of the illustration, or the subject matter, or the unconventional way it was displayed. It was primarily because the drawing truly captured the mood and beauty of the moon in a way photographs never seem to do. And I appreciated having a way to enjoy it in broad daylight. No wonder Michael knew it was my favorite piece. He had already heard me gushing over it. But one thing I never told him was, it had also instantly reminded me of the song. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the song that my ex wrote about me. That is what inspired me to go on this year-long music diet, which led to me starting the Happiness soundtrack. If you'd like to hear more about that, you can listen to episodes 1 and 2. I would recommend listening to them in that order as well. In a melody that I only ever refer to as the song, my ex was singing about finding himself awake in the middle of the night. How he couldn't seem to stop thinking about me in those moments and missing me. How he lost sleep over wishing he could go back and change pretty much everything about the way he had let things unfold. By the way, this is not the ex who was a pilot, the one I had already told Michael about. This is a completely different person from years prior. Anyway, there are intense emotions to discover about someone who loved you, especially after going years without any closure. And the video for this song features a full moon, partially obscured by clouds. Imagine associating something as commonplace and gorgeous as the moon with someone who broke your heart. Before I heard that song or watched the video, I had found the serenity of the moon absolutely breathtaking. I enjoyed the moments of peace that came from gazing at it. But now, every time I see a full moon, I can't help but think of the song and all the perplexing emotions it stirs up within me. That's why I had to stop listening to it. But I couldn't get away from the moon. I would never be able to. For a long time, the sight of it would make me incredibly sad. Then it made me angry. I wanted it back without him attached to it. That artwork felt like a way I could have that. It also seemed to perfectly express the beauty I see in it. That's why I loved the drawing. I also appreciated forming a new association with the moon right there with Michael. That's what I said in my smile. But I never said it in words. I didn't think I should, especially on a first date. I didn't even know if I should feel any of those emotions. So Michael never knew. I made several guesses as to his favorite piece, and I dragged him all over the museum to find it. At some point, it became comical to the both of us. Eventually, I gave up, upset that I couldn't return the favor of making him feel seen. He took my hand and led me to a Magritte sculpture that we had both admired, the one of a man with a birdcage for a body. "Oh yeah, of course," I sighed. We gazed at it together for a moment. Its sad beauty was both intriguing and unsettling. The cage was open, and one bird was inside, peering out the door. Another bird was perched outside the door, as though he was showing the captive bird that it could leave at any time. It was almost like the bird inside was afraid to abandon his sense of safety, even though the cage was also keeping him trapped. "This is such an interesting piece," I said. "What do you think it means?" "I think it represents secrets," said Michael. "The control they can have over us, how they can make us feel trapped, and how we sometimes feel the need to hold back parts of ourselves out of fear. But they could be the most beautiful parts." "I can totally see that," I said as I nodded. "What does it mean to you?" he asked. I pondered for a moment and finally shook my head as I replied, "I don't know. Why is he still sitting inside? The door is open," I wondered aloud. "It's so sad. It's like the bird outside is saying, 'You can come out, you know. You have wings. You know how to fly. You don't have to stay in there.' But it's never going to leave. He's always been there, and he always will be." Then an unsettling thought jolted me out of this memory. I'd been staring at the journal the whole time, but suddenly I actually saw it again. I flipped through the pages from the very beginning and saw the very first song in the whole project, "The Wishing Well" by A. King. It was my song. I'm intimately familiar with this tune and have memorized every last note because I've played it thousands of times. And the reason? It contains a memory of the man who wrote the song. It's the track that inspired my first year-long music diet in 2019. In our very first conversation, Michael had asked me about my song, and I had told him. But that's not the one I told him about. I don't talk about that one. That is the beautiful secret I keep from most of the world. I have written about it, and I have linked to that writing in the show notes. If you're curious, you can read it. I've thought about recording a narration of it at some point and sharing that on the show, like as an episode or two, but I don't know. If you have any thoughts about that, please share them. I would love to hear. It's not that the song is lackluster. It's that the memory attached to it is twisted. Even though it is beautiful in some ways, the truth is, I'm ashamed of it. My relationship with that person was intense and short-lived, and as I mentioned, it ended without closure. Because of that, I long struggled to reconcile with reality. So for years on end, every time I ever played The Wishing Well, it was to replay the memory I associated with it. Because that's where I felt loved. I played it over and over and over because I found more happiness in that memory of him than I had in life without him. Eventually, I became so addicted to it that I had to put it off limits for an entire year, along with everything else I'd ever heard before. That's how I knew it was a pretty effective strategy, and that's how I knew I could do it again for year 38. And yet, I had started this whole beautiful project by bringing that into the picture. I shook my head in disgust and self-loathing at how pathetic I'd been all those years ago. Why was that the first happy memory that came to mind? I flipped through the pages and saw entry after entry of humanity at its finest. Hundreds of people being vulnerable with me, a total stranger, sharing some of the happiest moments of their lives. Every entry proved that we all have this in common, even though every story is different. It's so beautiful to me that it almost moves me to tears. And I had started it all with the song from one of the ugliest chapters of my own life, the melody of a memory I'd grown addicted to. How dare I defile this beautiful book with an embarrassing shadow of my miserable past? Was the memory behind the song even happy anymore? The song has never changed, but my association has evolved tremendously. That's one reason I'm so fascinated by this concept of music and memory. Both can get distorted. While I had played the wishing well to relive an intoxicating memory, the reason I played the song on repeat was even more destructive. It gave me a sense of closure and validation that I never got. But the worst and most dangerous thing it gave me was hope. It made me believe my ex wanted to revisit things someday. Every time I played the song, it affirmed this belief more deeply. I soon found myself becoming addicted again, and not just to the song, but to possibility. It wasn't just the music that I kept on a loop. It was me. I had let myself live in an emotional loop in both songs. I had used music as an emotional cage. I am the bird stuck inside, and music is the cage I have surrounded myself with repeatedly. I wasted years of my life willfully trapped beside an open door, refusing to either acknowledge or believe that I could fly away at any time. My musical cages had provided a sense of safety and peace that I couldn't get from reality. But it was false, not to mention pathetic. When the story I was living didn't go the way I wanted it to go, I would build myself a cage of only the happy and hopeful parts, and I'd stay in there for as long as I could to avoid reality. And now I realized I was starting to do the same thing about Michael. I was surrounding myself with our beautiful potential and the alluring possibility that there would be room for me in his life again soon. Maybe things would change, but I had to face the reality that there wasn't room for me now. No one deserves to waste away in possibility. The real world has so much more to offer. And if I was the bird trapped in willful ignorance, then Michael was the one perched out front, helping me see the cages I had built. Now that I saw them for what they were, I couldn't let myself build another one. For once in my life, flying away from my problems was actually the right thing to do. I glanced again at all the entries. It occurred to me that I never would have had those interactions if I hadn't flown away from my cages. Every single one of them had been a happy memory for me. I had found so much real joy and peace through this project, instead of the semblance that had come from playing those songs on repeat, or from playing those emotions on repeat. I had discovered how beautiful the world is beyond the cage. Flying away from it is scary, but the happiness soundtrack is proof that no matter what you lose or how you lose it, you will find something through that loss. You'll also grow from it in the process. After reminiscing about several of those interactions and the joy they'd given me, I finally forced myself to ask Michael the question I already knew the answer to. So how much capacity do you feel you have for dating right now? I asked over the phone. Very, very little, he replied. Do you see that changing anytime soon? No. I knew it would hurt to try and shrink myself down to fit into those small gaps. I knew I deserved more than gaps. and I knew he wanted to offer more than what he could give. I also knew how much it would hurt to let myself linger in the possibility of change. I couldn't grow in that cage. I could only grow from leaving it. I admitted to Michael, and to myself, that we should stop trying to force something he didn't have time for, just because we both wanted things to be different. We officially stopped trying to force our romantic connection. The next day, I went to the gym. When I walked in, I saw the man who always smiles, the one who said his song was Sail Into the Night because it got him through adulthood. If you're not familiar with that story, that's in episode 8. In that moment, that's exactly what I needed help with, so I finally played the song for the first time. I wish I could play it for you here, but because of copyright issues, I can't do that. I have linked to it on Spotify in the related listens, and I will link to it in the show notes if you're on another platform. I heard the soft piano playing a melody that was both uplifting and acknowledging of troubling times, like a hug from someone who loves you and understands that you've been struggling. It was followed shortly by opening lyrics that resonated with me deeply. I know it's a pain when the stars let you down and you've lost your way. I immediately felt seen and was ready for any message that followed. The song goes on to say that even if you don't have hope, it'll be back someday. That venturing off into the void is a different kind of beauty. It's okay to wander through uncertainty. You don't always have to know where you're going. Sometimes you just need to trust that going is the right thing to do. That music brought me a different kind of peace. One in accepting reality instead of reliving a memory or lingering in possibility. And I never would have discovered that song if I hadn't left my cage. It seemed like life had brought it to me when I needed it the most. On my way out of the gym, which was the saddest workout ever, I thanked the man again for sharing his song. I said I had finally listened to it, and I really appreciated the emotions it evoked. For so long, I had let music hold me back, but now it was helping me move forward. Instead of keeping me in a cage, it was reminding me that I still know how to fly. Maybe Michael and I were never meant to have that relationship. Maybe it was only supposed to be potential. Maybe the reason he came into my life was to help me see the cages I had built. And maybe the happiness soundtrack is here to keep me from building any more. To everyone who has ever contributed to the journal, please know that it means more to me than you will ever understand. I am grateful from the depths of my heart. I hope this story shows you that there's a beautiful world beyond any cages you may have built, no matter how dark things may seem right now. There is a door, it's always been open, and you already know how to fly. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I know this this might feel like a bait and switch, I don't know, because you listened to episode 9, which was like happy and lighthearted and fun. And then it's followed by this part 2, which is like a lot deeper and more emotional than you thought, I'm sure. It went deeper than I thought it was going to go, to be quite honest with you, which is why I made it a different title. Like, it just didn't make sense to have the same thing called a part 2. I imagine this has brought up some emotions for you. I'd like you to think about some cages you may have built around yourself. Have you ever built any with music? Whatever they are, how did you become aware of them? How did you find the courage to leave? And how did things change once you escaped? Those are very personal questions. You don't have to respond in any public forum if you don't want to, but I do think that they're important for you to ponder. Regardless, feel free to share your thoughts with me if you want to. There are a few ways to do so. If you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, you can drop a comment. Or if you're on Instagram, you can connect with me at Happiness Soundtrack and comment on the post for this episode. You can always DM me about your song too. I would love to hear your story. As for my stories, I share a new one every Monday. Next week we'll have a lighter tone, don't you worry. I'm going to share the 5 happiest songs according to science and 14 tips to boost happiness. These are all based on different articles I've read about happiness. I actually read most of these when I was struggling with depression several years ago, but even though they're not all related to music, it's obviously related to this topic of the show, and I thought a lot of people might enjoy it. So that's what I'll have for you next week. You can listen to all the stories right here on the podcast, watch the videos on YouTube, or read the blog at happinesssoundtrack.com. I hope this episode made you smile. Maybe this one is a little bit dark, but I hope it made you feel seen, if nothing else. It would mean a lot to me if you let Apple or Spotify know how much you enjoy this show. The best way to do that is to leave a rating or review on those apps. Or if you're on YouTube, you can hit the like button or subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for your support, everyone. I'm glad you're having a good time here. Have a great week, and I'll be back next Monday with a song and a smile.